right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. Before we get started, I wanted to extend a sincere thank you to the majority staff for hosting us today and helping us secure this room, which has so many different education gears up here on the walls. We are grateful for the space and the partnership. I'm joined today by CEF's new Executive Director, Ed.S, over here, who will be introducing our panel in just a moment, along with our illustrative panel here today. And I also want to extend a deep thank you to CEF staff and BCG staff for helping us make today's briefing happen. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Wojtek. I am the Senior Policy Advisor at Advanced CTE, and I'm currently serving as the Acting Board President for the Committee for Education Funding, or CEF. CEF is the nation's largest education coalition, representing more than 110 organizations from across every corner of our community, from early learning to K-12 to post-secondary and career preparation and everything in between. Each year, our coalition comes together to produce this budget book. It has become something of a tradition, and I'll admit, one of my favorite traditions each year that I look forward to. I'd like to express my deep appreciation again to CEF and ACG staff, alongside CEF's co-chairs for research, advocacy, and social media, for all of their work in helping plan this briefing today and bringing together our panel of impressive speakers that will be providing some key perspectives on all of these programs in just a bit. The budget book is a distillation of our coalition's collective work in support of federal investments across the entire educational continuum. From early learning programs like Head Start to core K-12 investments like Title I and IDEA, all the way through Pell Grants in the post-secondary and workforce programs that prepare students for life and careers. Every section reflects the deep expertise of our member organizations, and this resource simply would not exist without all of your knowledge and expertise. And while this book is truly a team effort, I want to personally thank everyone who lent their time and expertise to bring this year's edition to life, including and especially each of the book section editors, I should say, and of course, our longtime and stalwart editor-in-chief, Myrna Mandelitz, who has overseen this effort and bird-dogged it every year for so many years. I also want to take a moment to name why we are all here today in this week. The President's FY27 budget request proposes funding for the Department of Education at $76.5 billion, roughly $2.3 billion less than FY26. While proposing to consolidate or eliminate dozens of programs and shifting others into entirely different federal agencies. The timing of today's briefing is no accident. In just a few days, the House Appropriations Committee will begin marking up the FY27 Labor H funding bill, this Friday, in fact. In the weeks and months ahead, the choices Congress makes here will decide whether young children get an early learning opportunity and a seat or a wait list, whether impact aid districts serving military and tribal communities can keep teachers in their classrooms, whether TRIO and Gear Up keep pathways to post-secondary opportunity open, whether Pell Grants can be funded at full value, and so much more. Education funding is a small fraction of the federal budget, but it plays an outsized role in our national well-being. These are investments in the American people, in students, in families, and our country's long-term success. And that's exactly why this book exists and why we are here today, to give everybody here in this room, on both sides of the aisle, a clear and credible picture of what these programs do and what is at stake. Quite simply, cutting federal support for education is a debt our nation cannot afford. And so with that, I'm going to hand things over to CEF's Executive Director, Ed.S, who is going to be introducing our amazing panel today. So thank you very much.
And Steve is right, it is an amazing panel, and it is my pleasure to introduce that panel. So Shawna, Rader, Kelly, is the nationally certified school psychologist in Bozeman, Montana, where she serves as the school psychologist at Bozeman High School and leads the district's crisis response team. In addition to her full-time work as a school psychologist, Shawna has worked as an adjunct professor professor at Montana State University and as a consultant for the Montana Office of Public Instruction. She serves as her state's credentialing resource specialist and chairs the state's credentialing and professional standards board. Shawna currently serves as president of the National Association of School Psychologists. And to my right, we have Stacey Edmonson. Dr. Edmonson serves as the chair of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, providing strategic leadership to the National Association representing educator preparation programs across higher education. She is also currently the Assistant Vice Chancellor with the Texas A&M University System. She has served as the Dean of the College of Education at Sam Houston State University and as a professor of education leadership. Over the course of her career, she has worked across pre-K through 12, higher education as a teacher, principal, central office administrator, and academic leader. And Dr. Andria McMichael is an accomplished executive leader with more than 20 years of experience advancing educational excellence. She currently serves as the Chief Education Officer for the YMCA Metro Atlanta, where she provides executive leadership for a comprehensive early learning portfolio, including Head Start, Early Head Start, C-Campus, which is the Child Care Access Means Parents in School program, and also is operating an EYC accredited or NASP accredited early childhood program serving children and families across Georgia. Prior to her current role as CEO, Dr. McMichael served in leadership positions with charter school organizations, public school systems, including the Fairfax County Public Schools, welcome home, and Imagine Schools, where she specialized in leadership development, strategic planning, organizational improvement, and instructional systems design. So just to kick off our briefing, we're going to have each of our speakers come up and present some remarks. Then we'll move into a conversation with some planned questions, and then also open up the audience questions as well. So Stacey?
All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. As was mentioned, I am the current board chair of AACTE, the organization that serves teacher preparation and educator preparation across the country. We do have representation in all 50 states, primarily colleges of education who prepare the teachers that serve our K-12 schools, again, across all 50 states in the country. I first want to say not only thank you for allowing me to be here, but thank you for your investment in education. As I'm sure you'll probably hear, and as I'm sure you know, it is without question the discipline that allows all other things to be possible. The country does not function without high quality teachers, and those don't happen by accident. So it is an investment into the quality of those teachers and the preparation of those teachers that makes high quality education in our country and the advancements that happen because of that education possible. There is no greater impact on student learning than that of the teacher, and there's no greater impact on the teacher than their quality of preparation. We have data that show in the first 5 years of a teacher's trajectory, that is when the most growth occurs in terms of their ability to impact students and their ability to be adept at the position of itself. Also have data to show that within those same first 5 years, half of our teachers leave the field. And the less prepared they are when they come in, the more likely they are to leave the field before those first 5 years take place. And in some instances, the level of preparation yields a attrition rate of over 62%. 62%. And so the level and impact of preparation is a high stakes impact, opportunity and responsibility for the country. 3.3 million teachers across the United States. In the last year, over 412,000 of those teachers were not prepared. And by that I mean not certified and not in a certification accredited program to become prepared. So those people are impacting real children in real schools across our country. So all that context to say that as AACTE, the organization that is committed to the preparation of those teachers, we are looking at the impact of what budgetary decisions have on access for high-quality teacher preparation. Things such as, you heard mentioned, Year Up, TRIO, those types of programs absolutely have an impact in our colleges of education and in our universities as to who has access to become a teacher and what level of quality preparation they have into that opportunity. We would ask for specific attention to funding such as the Teacher Quality Partnership or TQP grants, $130 million allocated to that type of effort. Teacher and School Leadership, TSL, incentive funds, $173 million towards that programming. SEED grants, which were due last night, speaking from personal experience, supporting effective educator development programming and $132 million. Augustus Hawkins Centers for Excellence, $45 million in the budget. ESEA Title II funding in the amounts of $2.4 billion. IDEA, the funds that support students who have special needs across the different spectrums of what that looks like. In the realm of $135 million. And restoration of grants that have previously been canceled related to research and other Department of Education, National Science Foundation, and federal agencies that have a direct impact on colleges of education and educational research and how we know teachers are well prepared as they move into the field. Thinking about that from a budgetary perspective, asking for the opportunity for ideas and policies and procedures that incubate, study, and scale innovative practices in high-quality preparation programs. Strengthening and modernizing the profession for long-term sustainability through evidence-based models such as strategic staffing, looking at how we staff classrooms differently. Those opportunities happen through the investment of funds in the budget related to education. But doing all of that while maintaining high standards for educator preparation and for those that are in the practice of education. Aligning with the needs of both current and future students. Again, I want to also pay attention to, we're not naive to the fact that there's a shortfall for Pell funding. We also balance that with the idea of without those Pell grants, people do not become teachers across our country. And as we look to how do we manage those sorts of shortfalls and those sorts of investments, I know in last year when we were here, that conversation was around increasing the number of semester credit hours for Pell eligibility. Impact of decisions like that in terms of becoming a teacher. Student teaching ends in high quality preparation. Probably the most important aspect of the teacher preparation process is that last year of what's traditionally called student teaching or more recently called residency. Those do not generate 15 semester credit hours. You would essentially knock out every single person who needs Pell grants to become a teacher out of eligibility with that type of decision. And so thinking about Pell eligibility and how we fund that in a way that does not inadvertently exclude teacher preparation from that. So I heard in a conversation this morning the notion that education is infrastructure, that education is the essential building block to all of the things that happen across the country, and the investment in that from a budgetary perspective is not just important, it's essential to the health and well-being of the country moving forward. And so I would ask today for your attention in how we move forward with those types of impacts. Again, thinking about the grants, thinking about innovation, thinking about what leads to high quality preparation, and how do we intentionally invest in the programs and the grant opportunities and the research opportunities that make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacey. Andria? It's also fun being on the slides.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Andria McMichael, Chief Education Officer for the YMCA of Metro Atlanta, servicing over close to 3,500 little ones from 6 weeks to 5 years old. We are one of the largest Head Start providers in the state of Georgia, servicing over 3,100 children from 6 weeks to 5 years old. through that federal funding grant. In this opportunity that we have and have had for the past 20 plus years, we've been able to touch the lives of little ones, as well as provide all the resources and support parents as they are the child's first teacher. And with that, supporting those families that are most vulnerable population that we have throughout our nation. You know, Head Start has been around since 1965 and been able to be a part of the lives of 40 million plus families. That's absolutely amazing. And it is contributed to and appreciative to the focus in on the foundation of education. And you heard about the importance of supporting the education, the School of Education and Preparation Program for teachers. And these are the quality teachers that we need in our programs such as Head Start in order to prepare our children, our future, for long-term success. With that, we're so appreciative of the continuous support on both sides for our Head Start program. There are so many various avenues that have happened in the past couple of years with Head Start, knowing that it is a stapler and it is a pillar in supporting those early learning children and families that need us the most. But of course, there have been several challenges, and specifically in the past few years, where there has been flat funding or funding that has been minimized from the federal government. And of course, this has affected us tremendously with the rise in inflation, with also not having the appropriate teaching qualification, those that have the staffing that are able to provide the services. Just as if we just talked about, and my colleague just shared the importance of supporting the College of Education, not having those teachers to come out and wanting to go into the field of early childhood education is vitally important. If we want to stand on the ground in the importance of building a foundation through early learning programming. You know, the first 5 years of learning is so important. It's when the brain is developed in our children. It's when children really extend their first experience in building relationships with age-level children or their peers. It's the point in which there is, they develop out social skills, social-emotional skills, confidence, those tools that they truly need in order to be successful beyond just kindergarten, just beyond. So I would say that, again, we appreciate the opportunity to continue to provide these services for the most eligible low-income families. And these families are identified by the poverty guidelines. So we're talking those that have the difficulty just putting food on the table. And I don't know if you know, but the average cost of childcare per year, average between, for those for 6 weeks to 5 years old, is between $11,000 and $15,000 annually per child. And so having Head Start in place offers the opportunity for every single family, every child, to have that quality education and preparation needed in order for them to become successful. So Head Start, historically, has been a great story to tell about our great nation and how we are so focused in on ensuring that once our children and our babies are born, that they have the opportunity and the experience regardless of where their background comes from. And we want to continue that. So thank you again for the continuous support of Head Start, and we truly appreciate it, and we hope that you continue to focus on our early learners as well.
Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to CEF for including me, and to the other panelists for your partnership in education and care for our children and youth. It's an honor to be here. My name is Shawna Rader Kelly. I'm a nationally certified school psychologist and the president of the National Association of School Psychologists. I'm also the parent of a middle schooler. I send my daughter to public school every day. Parent of a middle school for 7 more days when I'll be the parent of a high schooler. Many people are not familiar with our profession, but school psychologists are uniquely qualified members of the school community. We have comprehensive training in both psychology and education and extensive knowledge of school systems, child development, learning, and mental and behavioral health. We provide direct and indirect services to students. We collaborate with administrators and partner with families, and we support students' ability to learn and teachers' ability to teach. I've been a school psychologist in my home state of Montana for 22 years. All of those I've spent serving students in our public schools. But I've spent the past year traveling the country talking to school psychologists and other educators. They shared their stories with me, not just their perspectives as school psychologists, but also as parents and grandparents of children with disabilities, or children who are struggling with anxiety, or children who've experienced bullying, or even who have contemplated or attempted suicide. And I can't overstate the importance of ongoing, consistent, reliable, and increased federal investments in education. I'm continually inspired by the dedicated and passionate educators working to help every single student reach their potential, but also continually dismayed at the resource inequity that continues to exist in our schools. During my travels, I stood in front of many rooms and I asked people how many people in the room worked in a district that had openings for school psychologists this year. And in every single room that I visited, people raised their hands. Sometimes more than half in the room raised their hands. And even more hands went up when I asked about districts with opening for teachers, or nurses, or paraprofessionals who serve our most vulnerable students. But sadly, students and schools have gotten used to doing more with less, and it's our students, it's the children that pay the price. Federal education funding exists in part because opportunity is not evenly distributed across states, districts, or neighborhoods. I saw this firsthand. Schools without sufficient staff, without bus drivers, without sufficient instructional materials, even schools that had to close for days this winter because their heating systems were too old to heat their buildings. The President's fiscal year 2027 K-12 education budget request is not just a set of numbers, it's a statement of priorities. The request would reduce overall discretionary funding for the Department of Education by $2.3 billion. For the students in schools that rely on federal education investments, it would have real and immediate consequences. And here are some of the highlights that we want to share with you today. The proposed budget level funds Title I, which supports students in low-income and impoverished communities. Level funding sounds nice, but with inflation and rising costs, it will be a cut. The proposed budget increases funding for IDEA grants for states. This is a welcomed investment, as Congress has never fulfilled the federal commitment to cover 40% of the excess cost of special education. However, the proposed structure of the funding raises significant concerns. The proposal eliminates the IDEA preschool grants and all of the IDEA national activities. The budget suggests that states could opt to take up those activities themselves, but some states don't have the infrastructure or are dreadfully unequipped to keep those important programs going. Formula funding is essential, but so are dedicated investments in the infrastructure that makes IDEA work. Personnel preparation helps ensure that students with disabilities are served by properly prepared and qualified professionals. Parent information centers help families understand and exercise their rights. Technical assistance helps states and districts implement the law effectively, and these are not optional add-ons. They are part of how we ensure that students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education in practice and not just on paper. Another key element that deserves particular attention is the proposal to consolidate 17 programs, collectively funded at $6.5 billion in FY26 into $2 billion mega flexible block grant. This is a 69% cut to these programs. Additionally, states would be required to spend at least 25% of the funds on evidence-based literacy instruction and 25% on mathematics. On its face, these requirements can sound appealing, but this block grant proposal doesn't actually provide flexibility. It forces hard and unnecessary choices. A district that loses targeted federal funding may be forced to choose among essential services that should not be in competition with one another. Districts may be forced to choose between promoting family engagement or offering art and music, both of which are critical to student learning. A larger bucket with fewer dollars does not strengthen schools. It simply gives states and districts more burden to decide which unmet need will remain unmet. For school leaders, it's not flexibility, it's triage. The budget proposal eliminates the only 2 federal funding streams dedicated to training, hiring, and retaining school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers, and other school mental health professionals. The Mental Health Services Professionals Grant and the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant Program. This is on the heels of an unprecedented and abrupt cancellation of more than 200 grants in April of last year, which has caused significant disruption and uncertainty for hundreds of school communities and left students with little or no access to school mental health services. In our rural communities, where schools are often the only access point to care, these cuts were devastating. Although new awards for these grants were issued at the end of 2025, projects that focused on increasing access to school counselors and school social workers were no longer eligible, bucking congressional intent and best practices. It's imperative that we address shortages in school psychology, and we are grateful for those investments, but we're not interchangeable, and students need access to all of this. Congress appropriated approximately $165 million for these grants in FY26, but it's unclear when or if new grants will be awarded. Without clear guardrails and dedicated federal investments, students' access to these professionals may depend even more heavily on local wealth and political will. I know because I've seen this play out time and time again, so I want to talk more about the need to protect these investments. NASP recommends a ratio of 1 school psychologist for every 500 students, but the current national ratio is double that recommendation. The root cause of the shortages in education is multifaceted. For school psychologists, a primary cause is that there simply aren't enough of us to hire. The Mental Health Professionals Grant was created to strengthen that pipeline. Some districts lack the financial resource to hire or to retain their existing staff, and the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant Program was created for this purpose. Workforce shortages in school psychology, as with other professions, limit, if not entirely prevent, students' access to comprehensive school mental and behavioral health services. School psychologists and other professionals partner with families and educators to help students succeed both in and out of school. I spent most of my career in a high school setting, where student mental health is a primary concern and a significant barrier to learning for many students. I speak to parents every day who are desperate for support for their children, and the research reinforces this. 8 in 10 parents across the country want their children to have access to school-based mental health professionals like me. And we know that students are 6 times more likely to access needed care when it's provided in a school setting. In rural communities in Montana, the school psychologist may be the only mental health professional in the entire county. And while families may not have the ability to take their child to a provider who lives 150 miles away, they put them on a bus to school every single morning. Continued federal investment in these 2 grants is critical. To date, Congress has provided more than $1.4 billion for these grants that put more providers in schools where we can readily support students. Despite this tremendous investment, these programs receive far more applications than can be funded due to the incredible demand. Most importantly, the outcomes are undeniable. The federal investments in these programs have enabled almost 2 million students to receive school mental health services, trained more than 2,500 new school mental health professionals, and supported the hiring and retention of more than 26,000 school mental health professionals. Communities saw decreases in suicide risk, disciplinary concerns, and chronic absenteeism, and there was an 80% reduction in wait time for school mental health services. Projects supported by these grants use innovative strategies tailored to the unique needs of their communities, such as Grow Your Own and flexible training programs that serve underfunded and underserved communities. In Montana, these investments help to support our tribal nations, and as a state with one of the highest youth suicide rates, these grants offer hope for students, families, and school communities. The President's proposal does not reflect the urgent need to develop the school mental health professional workforce, and it disregards the data that demonstrates the overwhelming success of these grant programs. Eliminating these funds is not only harmful, it's reckless, and the consequences are not abstract. They show up when a student waits weeks or months for an evaluation, when a family can't get help navigating behavioral concerns, and when teachers are left to manage escalating needs without sufficient consultation or support. They show up when schools rely on crisis response because prevention was never adequately funded. We urge Congress to reject this budget request and instead protect and increase investments in core K-12 programs, including Title I and IDEA, and to reject proposals to eliminate dedicated funding for school safety, student mental health, family engagement, English learners, and other essential supports. Thank you.
So thank you all so much for just elaborating and telling us from your perspective sort of the work that you do, the federal funding that supports that work, and sort of what's at stake, as our hearing kind of suggests, or briefing kind of suggests. Shawna, you touched on this, a bit in your presentation, but before we get to fiscal year 27, there have been some challenges that we faced last year, fiscal year 25. So just wanted you all to have an opportunity to just talk about some of those challenges, what you face in terms of federal funding and the work that you were doing, and maybe what some of the causes of those challenges were. That's open to anyone.
So I'll start with what might be the elephant in the room, which for many of us in colleges of education, were the cancellation of so many of our federal grants. Most of those grants, in large part, were direct student support for access to educated preparation programs. And so for us, I'll just speak personally at the college where I was dean, we lost grants that 100% funded paraprofessionals moving into teacher pathways. We lost grants that helped us financially support students that were coming from underserved and poverty backgrounds. We lost grants that directly supported mental health professional development. And so the impact of those losses was far greater than just dollars in my budget, and frankly that was the least of the issue. The impact was the loss of access for every one of those aspiring teachers, every one of those aspiring counselors, all of those education professionals that no longer had the financial capacity to complete their program. And that impact is real, and it's compounded, because every one of those folks that then opts not to become a teacher, hundreds of students every year, they will not be able to serve. And so to think about that in a simple context doesn't do it justice. The context has to be comprehensive and compounded over time, and what that impact actually looks like.
So around Head Start, and specifically with us as a recipient of Head Start, we are considered a November 1 recipient, grant recipient, which means that although Head Start is a 5-year grant cycle program, every year we have to provide a continuation application for annual budget funding, okay? So with that, around October, November is when we receive notification of our award so we can continue the program. So when the federal government shut down, we were in the middle of that and waiting on the actual response and receiving that. So what does that mean? Well, it meant for us that possibly, we're considering closing our doors during that time. And that is not only going to impact us as a grant recipient, but 5 other grant recipients just in the state of Georgia alone. So you're talking affecting 23,000 children and families in the state of Georgia that would not have immediate child care services through Head Start. And also affecting 2,000 plus staff members. We actually have 375 staff members, but collectively it would be 2,000 staff members that lost their jobs just immediately because we didn't have the dollars. They immediately stopped. So of course that created angst around what are we to do in supporting those families, creating angst around hired teachers who are already not receiving the appropriate salary and compensation based on their credentials, how would they be able to put food on the table and pay their bills. It really just put us in just an area of scarcity, an area of just challenging times. So we collectively had to come together and really hone in on how can we sound the alarm that this is affecting us? How can we sound that alarm all the way to Washington? So I definitely have to give credit. Our presidency of YMCA of Metro Atlanta, Lord Cruz, really was the one that spearheaded and how we collectively came together to talk to representatives, local, state, and federal, about our growing need of what was happening at that time. There was no more funding. It immediately stopped. So everyone needed to know how much this affected our programming at that point. But not only stopping there with representatives, but also reaching out to local foundations or organizations and asking them if they would at least provide a loan for us so that we can be able to continue those services. This was a trying time for us, and we did not have the dollars to stretch. So you're talking, we've not heard anything from the federal government, anything from the Office of Head Start, and that was late September until late December, when we finally received notification that funding would be coming in January. So those were trying times, but definitely us coming together to really pitch in to see how we can best support each other. Now, we were lucky, but many of the recipients were not lucky. Even though it was affecting 23,000 families in the state of Georgia, it's enough recipients around the country that it actually affected 60,000 families across the country not being able to have that child care services. And these are for our working families. 80% of our families are working families. So I would consider us to be more so of workforce behind the workforce. In order for our families and our parents to be able to go to work, and we're talking chicken factories where we serve some of our rural families. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a white-collar position, but necessarily those that actually provide services to the community. They would not be able to work without us being able to provide that child care. So it was definitely challenging times of last year, and we are still nervous about what is ahead. If there's, funding that will be delayed continuously, or there is no predictability of what the program looks like long term. And honestly, child care, that's the smartest investment that we could make as a country. Again, preparing children for success, not just going into kindergarten, but beyond. So it's definitely trying times for us, and we're so appreciative that we're on the other side of that this past year. But of course, we are nervous about what's to come.
Thank you. Shawna, give you an opportunity.
Sure. I'll just quickly underscore the importance of those grants to communities, to institutions of higher education, and to school districts. That's why you have something. And we're incredibly grateful for the bipartisan investments in those grants to develop the workforce of school psychologists and other school mental health professionals. I think what I want to emphasize is the paralysis that erupted from the cancellation of those grants. Districts uncertain if they could hire graduate training programs, uncertain if they could hire, if they could bring in entire cohorts of graduate students, unsure if they could continue graduate education that they were deeply invested in. And while some of those grants have been refunded, there still remains a great deal of uncertainty about the sustainability of those grant programs. And so again, we are deeply appreciative of those investments. The cancellation of some of those grants and the future uncertainty of those has created a lot of challenges for school districts, for state departments of education, and for graduate training programs.
Thank you. And actually, I'm going to pick up on that point. So you mentioned paralysis, and in your comments, Andria, you talked about predictability. And so even though we saw, lots of things happen at the federal level with FY25 and FY26, Congress in a bipartisan effort put that funding back, and for lots of things that we thought, were going to go away. They actually said no, these are the programs that we want. But can you just highlight sort of the concerns around predictability, what that means for you practically? And you all are also doing your own budgets, and if there's a line item that you're not sure when it's going to come, if it's going to come, that paralysis process. Can you speak to how that impacts the folks that you're serving, your communities, and the work that you do?
Sure. I mean, I think that the biggest concern is sustainability of those funds. I've spent my career working in public schools, and public schools do not want to hire people without the promise that they can keep them. We don't want to start programs and invest in the people and the programming and the training that it takes to implement those without knowing that they will be sustainable in the long term. And so I think the lack of predictability around those funds has caused many institutions to just take a step back and to pause, or to maybe not be as bold as they would have been if they knew that that was going to be there. And so I think for us in schools, the efficiency and the ability to ensure that those programs are put in place for our students and families will continue to be there is a primary concern. And so the unpredictability of funding will certainly impact what programs are implemented.
I totally would agree. Also, just the continuous rise of inflation that affects us. And one thing I want to just share with you all is understanding of what Head Start looks like. So Head Start is just not providing 6.5 hours of instruction for little ones 6 weeks to 5 years old, preparing them for kindergarten every day. Okay, it's just not teachers in the classrooms. But the beauty of Head Start is that it provides comprehensive services for the entire family. What is that? What we do is try to ensure that the whole child is prepared for kindergarten and beyond. Health screenings. We work with local providers for health screenings. We work with local school districts for services where children have been diagnosed or are waiting to get services for mental health or disabilities. We work with various local agencies when it comes to providing assistance for parents, rental assistance, food assistance, because as I noted earlier, we're servicing the neediest of the needy population. These are families that are below the poverty guidelines that we utilize to enroll children every single day. So with uncertainty of what the budget looks like, and as far as in providing continuous services to Head Start, how would we be able to recognize and provide those continuous partnerships to preparing for those the whole child? We had, I would say, this is the appreciative part about Head Start. As I noted that we have that partnership with various providers. In Atlanta alone, for instance, we have a partnership with Children Healthcare of Atlanta. And what that does, we have what is a nurse navigator program. So with that supportive funding, not only are our children able to get those health screenings that they need in preparation for kindergarten, but it also in that role, that nurse navigator that certified RN from Children Healthcare, what we call CHOA in Atlanta, provides guidance to families. 80% of our families, when they enter our program, even last year, did not have a medical home. They did not have medical insurance. So as a part of the many compliances and 100 standards plus that we have to operate Head Start with every single day, we make it happen to ensure that our families get that health care that they necessarily need, especially for their little ones. So there was one family during that time where we were actually shut down or had to think about the shutting down during that time of the federal closing of the government during November, where one actual parent reached out to us because she could not understand what was happening with her child. This was during the Thanksgiving break. And something had occurred where the child had went out on the playground with their siblings and they're having all this fun, but then the child immediately fainted. And she didn't know what was going on. But what she knew what to do, because we developed those relationships with her, she reached out to her family service assistant that we have. And what a family service assistant is, in our program, we have what we call a case management. So each one of our children are assigned a case worker or a social worker, and we call them FSAs, that they are the liaison and support support for the families every single day for every aspect of that child. So this mother reached out to their FSA and said, hey, I need some help. What can you do? And that FSA immediately contacted the nurse navigator from Shawna that has been assigned to us because of the partnership, because we had the opportunity to build that partnership through Head Start programming, and guided that actual mother. And she was able to give that mother some recommendations of what could have been going on with her child and get her into a physician's office. And notably, that child was actually having a seizure. The child never had a seizure before. And of course, because the mother didn't know what that looked like or how to recognize it, because of this partnership and this service that we provide in Head Start, it really helped the mother, and she was so appreciative. And now that child is getting the continuous care that that child needs to be able to be successful. So again, with the uncertainty of the funding for Head Start and being able to provide these kind of partnerships, we don't know where our families will go in getting the necessary support that they need for their children.
Sure. Stacey?
I'll piggyback on the unpredictability, the instability of those variations in funding. Almost all of educator preparation pathways involve partnerships with school districts, and those depend on depth and stability of those relationships. And so, whether we're preparing teachers, school psychologists, counselors, principals, superintendents, those are multi-year pathways. And so, a major disruption from one year to the next year has an impact on whether or not those pathways continue and whether or not whether the graduate or undergraduate candidates have access to those pathways. And so there's an immediate impact when we have funding this year, the next year we don't, but oh, you get it back. That's great, but that disruption in between still had a major impact on accessibility for all of those folks that were in those types of professional pathways.
Thank you. In your comments, I heard about scarcity and also this phrase that folks have to do less with more. Just curious your thoughts for why that is an efficiency. I think there's always this argument that, no, we're being more efficient, with the dollars, but why is that an efficiency? What's the risk there?
I mean, I think the lack of continuity and the lack of training, that's what makes things efficient. We're constantly in school districts retraining people. Stacey, you mentioned in your comments the attrition rate for new teachers. Those are teachers who need to be trained in programs and in strategies and in district priorities. And when we see an attrition, particularly within the first 5 years, because people are leaving the field because they cannot afford to work in public education, or they're leaving the field because they don't see the support, or they're leaving the field because it's not the field that they believe they were entering into. We're retraining those teachers. People like me, like school psychologists, are supporting those teachers, and so that creates some of the inefficiencies that I think we see in school districts. We need to constantly retrain and re-up and regroup, particularly when there's attrition.
I'll give an easy analogy. We call it the one body approach. I mean, every school has classrooms full of children, and there has to be somebody in front of those children on day one. If there is a lack of qualified folks to fill those positions, then they get somebody who is not qualified. It's not a matter of having nobody. That's not an option. So the next option, which is efficient, is we hire somebody who hasn't gone through an educator preparation program, who isn't licensed, who isn't prepared. That is the first day they've ever been in front of children. And I'm going to indulge a little audience participation. How many of you want your children to have that teacher? Right. And so there is, you can use the name of efficiency in terms of do more with less, but at some point that is coming at the cost of children in classrooms, and they are real people's children who deserve better than that.
And of course, I can speak to the same line because the way Head Start works, we want to ensure that we have the most qualified teachers just as much as we expect it in the K-12 space and beyond. So with that, our lead teachers have to have a bachelor's BA in early childhood education. That is the requirement. Now, that is the same requirement for them to enter as a kindergarten or elementary school teacher in public schools. So here we are in this drought and shortage of staff when it comes to just having qualified teachers in the classroom. So again, the efficiency for us would be the same, like bringing on and developing out pathways, career pathways, where we're reaching out to various funders like United Way to even start off the foundations where they can start having childhood development associates, which is a certificate to at least allow them to enter in as a teacher assistant. That doesn't even get them to what the requirement is. But then we're trying to build from within in that pipeline. But again, that takes additional dollars. Us reaching out to other funders to see how we can actually build that in, reaching out to public schools in their high school sector to see if there is, conversation in which we can try to engage in some students who love to rock little babies to sleep, to see if they want to extend that and make that a part of what they do every single day. So it's been something that has definitely been an issue, a continuous issue. It's a revolving door for teaching staff, even in the early learning space. Making sure that we're meeting ratios as well. So with that, I am a former second grade teacher, and in my classroom years ago, I would have up to 34 children in the classroom, just me by myself. Just me by myself, having the expectation to pour into the minds of 7 and 8-year-olds and ensuring that they are successful and meeting proficiency on the state exams. 34 children. That's for writing, reading, math, social studies, science. Oh, and then technology is a part of that as well now. So if you think about that from that aspect, think about it from the early learning sector, where we want to ensure, again, quality learning is happening, specifically even in Head Start programming, where with our 4-year-olds, we want to ensure that we have up to 18 children in the classroom. 3 and 4-year-olds, you need to have 2 teachers in the classroom, because this is normally the time where children have never had any type of idea of what school is. The parents don't have anything or any idea of what school looks like at that age, and some of them come in not having the best experience of school. So they don't really have a thought in their mind of what it could be. But we want to ensure that quality still stands regardless of the amount of funding that we have. But it does limit us, knowing that there's a revolving door of teaching and teachers and staff. And even right now, as I sit here, we servicing 3,100 plus children, we have 30 open seats for staff. So we can't open classrooms without qualified teachers in the classroom.
Thank you. So then we're going to open up the audience Q&A. So invite our audience any questions before we turn to audience questions. Just one last question for you. So there is this effort in our national policy conversation around bringing education to the states. And where you are, so it's different, those different thoughts and emotions. But what I want to ask you all is, how can the federal government, the Department of Education, administration, Congress, how can they partner with you, support you in the work that you're doing in the places that you fall?
One way they can, first I would like to say that, and this is not the case in every state, but the state of Georgia, they have done a great job in really understanding the importance of early care, early learning. We have what we call the Georgia Pre-K program, and that is a lottery-based program where 4-year-olds that are 4 before the age of, before September 1, cutoff date of birth, turning 4 before September 1, they actually are able to engage in pre-kindergarten programs and curriculum and getting them prepared for kindergarten. But we know that that foundation needs to take place prior to them turning 4 years old. So that is why Head Start and federal funding for Head Start and child care is essential that starts from birth. In fact, our Head Start program actually services those that are expectant moms. So it goes back to then we start from before the child is actually entering into the world. So it is important that our state and our federal government, even local, are on the same page when it comes to the importance of child care, the importance of early learning, and being in alignment of the goal of setting all of our children up for success. And without this, there is a touch point situation, and not all children are able to be served. Supporting us in that effort, supporting us in helping us to build pipelines of recruiting qualified staff, retaining those qualified staff as well, in order to support our teachers and continuously beyond our families. So that part is great about what we have in Georgia, but there truly needs to be a true alignment of what it is that the federal government provides in order for all children to have success in early care.
Thank you. Shawna, thank you next.
Sure. First of all, we need strong state departments of education that understand the unique needs in their communities. But I don't think that we can underscore the importance of the federal investments in education and the importance of the oversight and the centralized resources that are provided by the Department of Education. For all of its flaws, IDEA to me is one of the most beautiful pieces of legislation because it is our promise to children and to families of children with disabilities that they will be included, that they will be protected, and that their parents will be a part of that educational process. It's a promise that we make to those children and those families, but it's the federal oversight and the support of programs like OSERS and OSEP that make that support a reality. And they're essential to us working in schools for fulfilling that promise. And so to me, there are wonderful things that we can do with state departments of education, and they are not matched by what we can do with programs and the oversight that are provided by the Department of Education. And Jared, I want to go back because the panelists also just reminded me of some things about doing more with less. And I think we talk about doing more with less, but I also want to acknowledge that sometimes we just do less with less. And that means less protections for students, it means fewer services, it means fewer programs, it means less intervention, which means that we spend more time responding or reacting to problems rather than preventing them. And so I also just want us to remember too that it's not always more with less, that sometimes it is cuts to programs, and sometimes those are cuts to programs that impact our most vulnerable children and youth, and so I think that we need to remember that as well.
No, thank you. Stacey?
Yeah, and I could not agree more about IDEA. As a former special education administrator, it's absolutely, those are things that happen at the federal level that those protections and those opportunities are invaluable, and they need to be at the federal level. But I think, to me, for the broader question, at this level, having federal policies, federal statutes, federal appropriations that support what happens at the state level. You know, from Texas, we are all about things happening at the state level, which is great. I mean, it's fabulous, and there are a lot of positive things that do happen there. But there are a lot of things that requires the federal government's support and overarching guidance to help make those happen. So thinking about, again, how do we look at all of the states are not created equal, and the populations that are served in those states do not look the same across those borders. And so thinking about what sorts of things at the national level need to be in place to ensure that all students in every state with disability, or all students who are coming from backgrounds of poverty, or all students who are coming into your federal work study program, all of those things, that there is sufficient guidance and opportunity at the federal level to support those types of programs, where we incubate new ideas, where we ensure that quality looks like quality no matter what state the child is in, and that access looks like access no matter what state the child is in. And I think some of those things can only happen with the federal support and strong federal policy that allows that to happen.
Thank you. So now we'll open up to audience questions. If you have a question, if you could just stand up and tell us your name and the office or organization that you are from.
Not all at once.
Yes, sir.
My name is Zach Martucci. I'm currently working for Rutgers University. So my question kind of is actually in regards specifically with Head Start in that program. With federal cuts for programs such as SNAP, TAMP, and SSI, how are you guys handling not only the cuts of the fiscal year budget, but as well as that and helping out those students and families?
So thanks for that question. Yes, so with Head Start, we have close to 85% of our families that we service, just specifically in the state of Georgia, and of course I know that goes beyond, that are receiving federal assistance, whether it be SNAP or WIC. And so it does propose a problem because the way it works, that is one of the ways in which they are eligible to be a part of our program. Again, we're servicing the neediest of the needy population. So when they come in to register their children, they have to present actual documentation to show in which they're getting these services. So without that actual documentation, we're unable to serve them, even though they know and we understand that they do not have the means for childcare for $11,000 per child. And a lot of our families that come in, they have more than one child. Okay, so they knowing that, and so with them not receiving that, it just puts us in a bad place when we know in our hearts that we want to service them, but we know that we have so many compliances and regulations when it comes to, making sure that we're in line with what is expected of us from the Office of Head Start. So what we try to do is, again, reaching out to additional funders to see if they would provide additional dollars to help us provide scholarships for those families in order to get into our program. We also will develop out a sliding scale based on just the labor market and the rate of what they could possibly make, and develop a sliding scale in which that would help to assist them to pay tuition at some of our tuition-based locations. So we try to figure out what we can, and knowing that they have a need, they are not in alignment with those poverty guidelines in order to continuously still service them.
Any other questions? This is your chance to ask questions as a practitioner, as a federal funding. Well, you all did such a fabulous job with any questions, so thank you. With that, I'll just ask one final question, which is just, you all are coming to DC, especially this house, people's house. Which is the federal government be doing? What can we do? If there was something that you would change about the appropriations process, the budget process, education funding, what would it be? And please make us look at it. But what would it be? What would you change?
I'll go first, and this may be oversimplified, but to me, it's my North Star. Develop policy and consider appropriations as if these were your children, that will be impacted by the decisions you make. And so, what would be right for your child in terms of the quality of teacher that's servicing their classroom and the level of preparation that person has, or the access to mental health professionals and their qualifications and their preparation, or your children's needs when it comes to coming from a disadvantaged background, and think of that perspective as you're making policies. And so with that, of course, the side for me is invest in teacher education, invest in accessible, affordable, quality pathways that help ensure that every child, no matter what state, no matter what school district, no matter what background, has access to a well-prepared, positively impactful teacher, because our future depends on it, and that child deserves it.
Thank you.
I would agree, Stacey. Like, it's so vitally important for us to consider if we want to ensure that all children that grow up and are raised in this country develop out to be the most responsible citizens in having a successful life and contributing to our society. It's so important that there is stabilization and predictability of federal funding in order for us to encounter and make sure that there is equitable experiences for all children across the board. One thing about Head Start that I definitely am appreciative of and helping our policymakers to understand is the impact. 25% of our staff members are former Head Start, and that's just our program alone, former Head Start children, and didn't think that they would make it out of poverty, but now have a career where they can thrive, that they can pour into other families based on their own stories of what Head Start has meant to them. And we can encounter various notable people that we know here in our nation who notice and recognize the importance of Head Start. So I would like for policymakers to understand that we have to have long-term, multi-year funding that is committed to supporting these initiatives that provide holistic, comprehensive services, not for the children alone, but also for all of the parents, to ensure that every one of our children have a great start and have qualified teachers in the classroom in order for them to be successful.
Thank you. Shawna?
Thanks, Sharon. I'll echo a bit of what Stacey said, and also add to, in education and in public policy, we're really good about talking about numbers. And I think what is less clear sometimes are the faces and the stories behind those numbers. For every student that doesn't graduate from high school, there is a story. A member of our community who is not reaching their full potential. For every literacy rate, there are students who exit schools with difficulty reading or being unable to read. And we don't talk often about the life cost, the human cost of some of these decisions. And so I think for policymakers to understand the human face, the human impact behind decisions, whether it's fiduciary or whether it's a policy. And I think opportunities like this to hear from people who are working in the field, who see that impact, who have those stories and who can share that impact, I think that's incredibly important. I shared a lot of numbers in my opening remarks about the budget today, but for every one of those numbers, there are stories. There are stories about first-generation college students who access graduate education that they didn't think was possible. There are stories about students who were impacted by their presence in their schools, and there's stories about communities that were impacted by students who graduated and went into the workforce and went on to do great things. And so I think focusing on the people behind those stories, and Stacey, what you said about just treating every decision as if it impacts the students, the children that you care about, I think that will make a difference.
Please join me in thanking our And so if you're interested in learning more about the President's budget and how it impacts the education community, please look on CEF's website, which is www.cef.org. Today they released a budget book, which includes more stories and state examples for not only the President's impact, but also what those programs do, why they're meaningful, and why they're of value. So please check out Education Matters on CEF's website for more information. It also includes, it's actually one of the only resources that we have available that includes the present budget requests up against fiscal year 26 funding and 25 funding as well. There are charts and resources there as well. If you did register for today's briefing, your office or organization, you will be sent a link to the electronic version, and then hopefully you've indicated whether or not you'd like a physical copy delivered to your office. And so please enjoy some of the light refreshments, and thank you so much for